The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In today's budget, the government has laid out a banquet feast on the table of corporations in the form of a $70 million tax cut, while it has cast crumbs before people in the province who can't even get a place to live. The number of affordable housing units that could be constructed with $70 million is in the hundreds. The number of new units of affordable housing that will be provided by this budget is under 40. Can the Premier offer his justification for a 12.5% reduction in the corporate tax rate, while so many families will not be receiving the investment that would provide them with a place to live?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, very proud of the work that's happened by all Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker. Better Together is about ensuring that we recognize the contribution of all Nova Scotians. That's why we continue to make sure that the child tax benefit has the largest single increase, Mr. Speaker, in the province's history. Why we continue to make sure the minimum wage has risen by $1, Mr. Speaker, the largest increase, Mr. Speaker, for a long time, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to make those investments to ensure that we continue to move all Nova Scotians up as we continue to grow this economy and provide opportunities, Mr. Speaker. That's the reality. That's what Better Together is about, and we'll continue to make investments in affordable housing, continue to make investments in rent subs, both with housing stock that we own, with co-op, and as well with the private sector, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, in a budget that lays out this grand $70 million banquet feast on the table before corporations in the tax cut, one of the crumbs that's cast on the floor for the people of Nova Scotia is the $3 million the Premier speaks of in rent supplements. And I call them crumbs, Mr. Speaker, because it would take so many of them to make a housing meal. In a rental vacancy market which is lower than Vancouver's or Toronto's, a carload of rent supplements won't accomplish anything because there's no place to rent to start with. I want to ask the Premier if he will acknowledge this, that the thousands of people who are hungry for a secure, affordable place to live are no better off today than they were before this budget.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, this budget will have an increase with community services and housing, Mr. Speaker, for $100 million. I'm surprised that the honourable member is complaining about the fact that we've been investing in the very things he's been talking about. He's asked us to ensure that we lift children out of poverty, Mr. Speaker. That's what this investment on the child benefit is about. He's asked us to deal with the housing, Mr. Speaker. We continue to provide a myriad of options. We had some people in the gallery today, Mr. Speaker, who are doing a tremendous job, partners of ours who are out working to provide affordable housing for mothers and children, Mr. Speaker. We continue to make these investments, and I'm really surprised. I can understand, Mr. Speaker, why he may be opposed for us working with the private sector to grow good jobs in the economy, because philosophically he's opposed to that. But why would he be opposed to the $100 million investment we're making to the very issues that he's talking about?
The Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm drawing attention to, and what the Premier ought not at all to be surprised that I would draw attention to, is the startling contrast between $70 million for the corporate sector and under 40 houses for those who need affordable housing. The crumbs of social spending in this budget, whether they are the poverty reduction crumbs or the housing crumbs relative to this $70 million, they don't add up to anything near the scope of this tax cut of 2 percentage points in the corporate tax rate. Mr. Speaker, when business said to the government, we are looking for a tax cut, the Premier came and delivered the tax cut to them. Now, what I want to ask is why he doesn't lend the same kind of an ear to the thousands of people who are looking for a place for their families to live.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, again, I want to thank the honourable member for the question. I'm not sure where he is going with his question, Mr. Speaker. The reality of it is, we are actually investing more money in Mr. Speaker, those who require our support, whether it's in housing, children living in poverty, Mr. Speaker. We continue to make those investments. At the same time, we're having record employment opportunities. We're working with the private sector to be able to provide more job opportunities for our sons and daughters to get their first job opportunity here in Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Provide people with new opportunities in education, Mr. Speaker. Provide them to be able to continue to grow the prospects of finding a different job in our province, Mr. Speaker. We continue to invest in housing in the myriad of options that are related to housing, Mr. Speaker, whether it's our shelters, whether it's first-time home buyers, whether it's a rent subsidy to get people in affordable housing, and yes, Mr. Speaker, with our partners out there on the front line who are responding to the needs of Nova Scotians who, Mr. Speaker, for whatever reason, find themselves looking for an opportunity for house, and we're going to continue to do that, Mr. Speaker, and I would hope that the honourable member will continue to read this budget and find in it the optimistic view that Nova Scotians see in it.